They didn't hear me come home, the water running, the low hum of two voices behind a half-closed door. I stood there with my hand on the bathroom knob, listening to the laughter that didn't belong in my house, in my marriage. By the time I turned the lock, something inside me had already broken wide open. My name is Aisha, and for 7 quiet years I believed I understood the man I married, his routines, his silences, the way he touched my shoulder in passing as if we were built from the same breath. We lived in a modest apartment where the light always fell softly through the curtains, a place that felt safe because nothing unexpected ever happened. Until that evening, when the familiar sound of running water became the beginning of a story I never meant to walk into. What followed was not rage, not chaos, but a long, quiet unraveling of everything I thought I knew. I reached home before the sun had a chance to slip all the way down. My keys were still warm in my hand, like they hadn't decided whether to stay or go. The hallway light flickered when I stepped inside, the way it always did when the day had been longer than the house expected. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Except for one sound, soft at first, then clear, the steady rush of water running behind the bathroom door. And then, a laugh. A woman's laugh, low and familiar enough to tighten something behind my ribs. That was the moment I knew the evening wasn't mine anymore. I don't usually come home early. Most days I linger at work, letting the last task stretch out so the apartment feels warm when I walk in. But that night, something sent me home sooner, maybe a whisper of intuition, maybe nothing at all. The living room sat in a soft half-light, curtains breathing gently with the wind from the balcony. My shoes made no sound on the floorboards, it felt like the house was holding its breath with me. I set my purse down carefully, like noise itself might break the moment. And then I heard it again, the water. Not the harsh spray of a shower, but the slow pour of bathwater, thick and constant. The bathroom door was closed, steam breathing through the crack near the floor. I could smell something faint, vanilla body wash, the kind I never bought. My chest didn't tighten the way people say it should. No rush of heat, no dizzy anger. Just a quiet cold that filled my limbs like winter settling into old walls. Inside that coldness, I heard her voice. Soft. Playful. Sana. Our neighbor. The woman who borrowed sugar last week and smiled at me like she was grateful for something more than sweetness. I stood there, a few steps away from the truth, unsure if I wanted to hear it or run from it. I don't know why I moved closer, maybe my feet decided before my mind could interfere. The floor gave a small creak, and the laugh inside the bathroom paused for half a second, then continued, lighter than before. I could hear two voices now. His and hers. Blended in a way that felt practiced, like a song they'd rehearsed without me. My fingers hovered over the doorknob. The metal felt warm, as if the heat from the bath had traveled through it. As if their hands had touched it moments before. I didn't open it. I didn't knock. Instead, I glanced at the tiny silver lock above the handle, the one we rarely used. The one meant to keep people out. My hand moved without shaking. One soft turn. A click so small it felt like breath leaving a body. The lock slid into place, sealing them in with the heat and the water and the lies they thought were still hidden. For a long moment, I just stared at the door. I could hear the water still running, steady and unbothered, unaware of the shape of betrayal filling the room behind it. My pulse didn't race. My throat didn't close. I only felt that same coldness, sitting inside me like a quiet decision. But a decision about what? I stepped back into the hallway, letting the shadows touch my shoulders. The tiles beneath my feet felt colder now, like the house had changed in the space of a single breath. A woman's voice lifted again, blurred through the door, but unmistakably joyful. She said something I couldn't make out, something light. He answered her with a softness I hadn't heard in months. The numbness in me deepened, spreading like ink into water. Not frantic. Not furious. Just final. I thought of the morning before, how he kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, the way someone rearranges a pillow without thinking. I thought of the way she smiled at him in the hallway 2 days ago, eyes lingering half a second too long. Everything rearranged itself inside my head, clicking into place like small stones finding their pattern in a riverbed. I stood there, listening to the muffled intimacy behind the locked door, and I realized something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. It wasn't the betrayal that hollowed me. It was the calm. The stillness in me where pain should have lived. I placed my hand flat against the wall, feeling the vibration of the running water on the other side. That was the moment I understood, the truth wasn't asking for a reaction. It was asking for a choice. But what choice? I turned away from the bathroom at last, letting the sound of water fade behind me like the end of a song I no longer wanted to hear. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dim and heavy, the air thick with steam and secrets. My shadow moved along the wall as though it didn't belong to me anymore. I walked toward the living room, each step slow, deliberate, like I was learning the house all over again, room by room. Behind me, the water kept running. Their voices floated between faint laughter and soft murmurs, unaware of the lock, unaware of me. I stood in the middle of the room and breathed, steady and quiet. What does a woman do with a truth she learns alone? Before the world knows it's been broken? The answer waited with the next chapter. The hallway felt longer than it ever had before, stretching out like a quiet road I didn't remember walking. My footsteps barely touched the floor, but each one echoed back to me, slow, hollow, as if I were moving underwater. The house had settled into a stillness so complete it felt deliberate. No voices behind the bathroom door now, just the soft slosh of water shifting on its own. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Some truths don't require witnesses, they announce themselves in silence, in the way a home exhales after being lied to. I moved toward the kitchen on instinct alone, my body deciding the direction while my mind lagged somewhere behind. The air smelled of something faint, lavender maybe, a scent that didn't belong to me. Or maybe it had been here all along and I hadn't noticed. The floor felt cold under my feet, like the house was trying to study me with its own kind of honesty. The cabinets, the countertop, the hanging dish towel, everything seemed too neat, too intentional, as though life had been quietly rearranging itself while I wasn't looking. I reached the kitchen doorway and placed my hand on the frame, needing something solid to hold. The light above the sink buzzed softly, a low hum like a tired sigh. And all at once, little pieces of the last few months shifted inside me. Conversations that ended too quickly. Phone calls he took outside. The new perfume Sana was wearing, sweet, persistent, the first time she hugged me at the elevator. How the scent stayed on my couch cushion longer than her visit should have allowed. I hadn't questioned any of it. I just kept moving, trusting the surface of things the way you trust a calm lake not to hide its depth. Now that surface was cracking. Quietly. Almost politely. I pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table, my hands resting flat on the cool wood. They trembled just slightly, the kind of trembling you only feel in the fingertips, private, easy to hide. Behind me, the hallway remained still. Only the faintest whisper of water shifted from behind the locked bathroom door. It was softer now, like it was settling, or maybe slowing. I looked around the kitchen the way you look at a place right before you leave it for good. The fruit bowl with its single bruised apple. The mug drying by the sink, his mug. The window above the counter showing nothing but a thin slice of evening light. I remembered the nights he said he needed air, grabbing his jacket when there wasn't enough reason to leave. I remembered waking up to find messages on his phone, names saved under letters that meant nothing. Or maybe meant everything. My heart didn't race. It just felt heavy, like it had absorbed every unasked question all at once. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the house settle. The refrigerator hummed. A pipe clicked somewhere deep inside the walls. But my own voice stayed silent. Locked behind my teeth like something I wasn't ready to release. I stood again, slowly, and walked back toward the hallway. The silence followed me, thick, steady, obedient. I reached the middle of the corridor and paused. The bathroom door stood there, closed and calm, as if nothing in the world was happening behind it. As if two people weren't sitting in warm water, wondering why the handle wouldn't turn. I listened for their voices. But there were none now. Only the water, moving softly, as though the tub itself was breathing. A thought slipped into my mind, thin and sharp. Maybe the signs had never been small. Maybe I had just learned how to look away. There was a reason I hadn't asked hard questions these past months. A reason I'd let him drift in and out with explanations that didn't touch the truth. As I stood there, my hand grazing the wall, I understood something I'd never said out loud. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's protection. A shield you hold between yourself and the heartbreak you're not ready to meet. But silence can also be a wound. A place where pain gathers, unspoken, until it fills every part of you. I didn't know which one mine was yet. Strength. Or breaking. All I knew was that the quiet inside that hallway felt like a choice I hadn't decided to make. I stepped close enough to the bathroom door to feel its warmth on my face. The faintest slosh of water answered me, gentle and unhurried, the way betrayal sometimes is. I pressed my palm to the wood, not knocking, not seeking, just feeling. The door didn't move. Neither did I. My breath sounded loud in the stillness. Too loud. Like I was finally hearing myself after months of listening to everything else. I lowered my hand, letting it fall to my side, and took one quiet step back. The hallway stretched before me again, long and shadowed. I didn't know where the next step would lead. But I knew the silence wasn't done with me yet. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to decide what to do with it. The key felt heavier than it ever had. Not because of its metal, but because of everything it had opened for me. Everything it had protected. Everything it had let inside. I set it on the dining table with a soft clink, barely a sound, but somehow it echoed through the whole house. It lay there under the warm glow of the overhead light, small and still, like a quiet confession. The kind you don't say out loud. The kind you're not sure you're ready to believe. Behind me, the house waited, holding its breath for whatever I would choose next. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the key the way you look at a childhood toy you suddenly don't recognize. It wasn't just an object anymore. It felt like a line between who I was an hour ago and who I was becoming now. My fingers twitched at my sides, wanting to reach for my phone. But who do you call when the truth is too heavy to hand to someone else? A friend? My sister? Someone who would hear the tremor in my voice before I even found the words? No. The silence felt too intimate to disturb. I exhaled slowly and stepped away from the table. The dining room was dim except for the small pool of light hitting the table's center, leaving the edges in soft shadow. The chairs sat tucked in neatly. The way he liked them. My eyes drifted over the room, the vase I'd bought but never filled, the candle melted down halfway, the placemat slightly crooked from last night's dinner. Small things, but each one shifted under my gaze, gaining a weight I didn't know how to carry. I felt the house watching me, as though every corner had been waiting for me to truly see it. I moved through the living room slowly, touching nothing, but letting my eyes fall on everything. The cushions were still indented from where we'd sat together yesterday. I remembered a joke he told, something small, something I laughed at without thinking too hard. How strange, I thought, that something could be both memory and warning. I paused by the bookshelf. A framed photo sat slightly crooked, the one from our wedding day. My hand reached for it before I even realized, fingers brushing the edge of the frame. The two of us were smiling, our foreheads almost touching. His hand was on mine. I lifted the frame. It felt lighter than I imagined. Fragile almost. I straightened it and set it back in place, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was hope. I walked to the laundry basket next, catching sight of the shirts we'd folded together just last evening. His shirt on top of mine. A small domestic rhythm that now felt like a faded song. behind all of it, the rooms, the objects, the memories, something shifted inside me. A quiet ache, slow and wide, like the horizon just before sunrise. The faintest sound reached me then. A muted splash. Soft. Contained. It came from the bathroom. The bathroom where I'd turned the lock, quietly, deliberately. The moment pressed against me like a hand on my spine. I made my way to the bedroom, moving with a calmness I didn't trust. The door creaked slightly when I pushed it open, the way it always did in winter. The room smelled faintly of our detergent, lavender and something clean. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping beneath my weight, familiar yet different somehow. The blankets were rumpled from the morning. The pillow he used still held the faint shape of his head. I folded my hands in my lap. They didn't tremble now. They just rested there, quiet and empty. The bathroom sounds reached me again, muffled, distant. Not laughter this time. Just movement. Water shifting. Maybe a whisper I couldn't make out. I stared at the far wall, at the shadow cast by the bedside lamp we rarely used. The room looked the same as always. But I wasn't. The thought rose uninvited, soft but sharp. What if I simply walked away? Walked out the door. Left the key exactly where it was. Let the truth sit here alone, waiting for someone who cared enough to claim it. The idea hovered around me like a breath I hadn't released. There was a strange freedom in it. A quiet terror too. To walk away meant acknowledging something final. Something real. Something I hadn't yet named. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of it settle into my bones. The house was silent again. Even the water had stilled, or maybe I'd stopped listening for it. I rose from the bed and walked back into the hallway, my steps soft, almost floating. The table came into view, and there it was, the key. Small. Unmoving. Waiting for a decision I still didn't have the courage to make. I touched it lightly with one finger. Just enough to feel its coolness. Just enough to know it belonged to a life I wasn't sure I wanted to return to. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. Inside, my heart matched the quiet. I stood there in the doorway, suspended between staying and leaving. And for the first time, walking away didn't feel impossible. Just unfinished. A question waiting for my next breath to answer. The house had gone so still, I almost believed they'd vanished. For a moment, all I could hear was the slow hum of the ceiling fan, the way it sliced the air like someone trying not to breathe too loudly. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, staring at the shadow of the bedroom door stretching across the floor. It looked longer than it should have, like the house was warning me of something coming back to life. Then, faint at first, their voices rose again. Not knowing I was on the other side of the silence they had broken. It started with a soft gasp. Just a small sound, barely shaped like fear, slipping through the narrow space under the bathroom door. I didn't move. Didn't blink. My body felt borrowed, like I was sitting in someone else's skin, watching someone else's evening unfold. Outside, the light had begun to fade. It washed the bedroom walls in a dull gray that made everything look tired, including me. The curtains stirred a little, the window rattling softly as the wind passed by. Even the wind, it seemed, wanted to keep its distance from what was about to happen. I listened to them shuffle, two people suddenly aware of the world beyond the warmth of their carelessness. A murmur. Then Sana's voice, sharp, rushed, like she was trying to stitch up something torn too suddenly. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the air settle in my throat. My pulse moved differently now. Slower. Detached. Like my heart understood something before my mind did. There is a quiet that arrives after betrayal. Not loud. Not violent. Just absolute. And I was sinking into it like a warm bath. Their voices grew clearer. Aisha? His voice tried to sound calm, but calm has a weight, and his didn't carry any. It drifted weakly, like steam trying to hold its shape. The handle clicked. Once. Twice. A gentle shake, testing, not believing. "Aisha, sweetheart, open the door." I almost smiled at the word sweetheart. It felt like an ornament he'd pulled out of storage, dust still sitting on top. Too old. Too forced. A word he hadn't used in months. Behind him, Sana whispered something I couldn't fully make out. It was thin, frantic, like a thread pulling tight. Her voice had changed. It no longer carried the confidence of a woman stepping into someone else's home too comfortably. This was different. This was fear trying to hide behind a whisper. "Aisha, we need to talk." I let the sentence hang in the air between us. Talk? Now, when the water had barely settled? Now, when their laughter from 10 minutes ago still clung to the tiles? The handle rattled again. Harder this time. The bathroom door shaking against the frame as though it remembered me locking it, and agreed with me. Still, I stayed quiet. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. But because silence, in that moment, felt like the only truth I had left. "Aisha, please, open the door," he tried again. I heard the crack in his voice, not sadness, but panic. The kind men get when they realize control isn't theirs anymore. Sana stepped closer. Her breath brushed the door when she spoke. "Aisha. I'm sorry. This isn't." Her words tumbled into each other, clumsy and trembling. It almost sounded rehearsed, like an apology she'd planned in case they were caught. But apologies carry weight only when the person speaking can stand still in the truth. Sana couldn't. I heard her shifting, pacing, adjusting the towel around her like she wished it were thicker, safer, farther from me. My heartbeat didn't race. If anything, it softened, settled, slowed into a steady, unfamiliar rhythm. Like something inside me had stepped out of the fire. I stood from the bed, feeling the floor cool beneath my feet. A long stretch of wood, old and forgiving, creaked lightly, just enough to remind me that I was still here. Still in this house. Still deciding what happened next. Their voices quieted. Listening. Waiting. I walked toward the bathroom door, not to open it, but to hear them more clearly. To hear the truth without them shaping it into something prettier. "Aisha, please," he said again. And for the first time, I realized. He wasn't calling me because he loved me. He was calling me because he needed saving. And I wasn't sure I wanted to save him anymore. I rested my fingertips lightly on the door. Not to open it. Just to feel the wood, the barrier, the choice standing between us. Their breathing on the other side grew shallow. Uneven. Like two people finally sitting in the consequences they'd created with their own hands. My own breath came easy. Too easy. As though my body understood something I hadn't yet said out loud. I stepped back. Slowly. Letting the space widen between us, inch by inch. Their voices pressed against the door again, soft, uncertain, almost pleading. But I didn't answer. Not yet. Some truths deserve to be heard in silence first. The dining table had never felt this large before, or maybe I had become smaller. I sat there with my hands flat against the wood, feeling every groove, every scratch left from years of quiet dinners and practiced conversations. From down the hall, their knocking began again, soft at first, like they were still hoping I'd pretend nothing had happened. But the apartment didn't have room for pretending anymore. With each dull thud against the bathroom door, it felt like the walls leaned in a little closer, as though the whole place was folding itself around me, trying to keep me from falling apart. The air in the apartment had changed. Still, but heavy, like the kind of silence that settles after someone says something they can't take back. I sat at the dining table, the same place where I'd shared morning tea with him, evening stories, long sighs in between. The chair creaked beneath me, familiar yet foreign, as if it didn't recognize the woman sitting in it now. The knocking grew louder, 2 sets of hands hitting the door with rising urgency. I didn't flinch. Not once. I kept my eyes on the far wall, noticing things I had never really seen before: a faint water stain near the ceiling, the uneven picture frame from our anniversary, the thin crack running down the paint near the corner. Maybe the apartment had been breaking long before I ever did. My breath came shallow, slow. Years of teaching myself patience, stillness, the art of staying calm even when my heart was begging me to scream. I had practiced silence until it felt like a skill. And now, sitting there in the dim glow of the overhead light, I wondered if that silence had paved the road for this very moment. If molding myself into the woman he needed had meant dissolving the woman I actually was. Sanaa's voice cut through the pounding, not loud, but trembling. A tone I hadn't expected. Fear, not guilt. And somehow, that made everything feel heavier. Their knocks turned frantic, less controlled, less careful. A rhythm of desperation. "Aisha, please, open the door." His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't move. My fingers traced the rim of my teacup, cold now, untouched since everything changed. The ceramic felt smooth, steady. Something that hadn't betrayed me. Another knock, harder this time. Then Sanaa's voice slipped through the cracks. "Aisha, please. Please, just let us out." Her words stumbled. Not rehearsed. Not sweet. Afraid. I closed my eyes, letting the sound settle into me. This wasn't the confident woman who used to wave at him from across the hallway, who laughed a little too freely at his jokes, who didn't mind stepping into our home uninvited. No. This voice belonged to someone cornered. Someone realizing the cost of a moment she thought would stay hidden. She banged on the door again, lighter than him, but quicker, like her hands were shaking. "We didn't mean." She swallowed hard. "Aisha, please. I'm scared." The confession scraped against the air. Why fear? Why now? What was she terrified of, the locked door, or the truth waiting outside it? The apartment felt even smaller then. As though all 3 of us were being pressed into the same shrinking space, even though only I was free to move. The pounding stopped. Just like that. Silence. It rolled down the hallway like a wave, washing over the tension, leaving something quieter, something sharper behind. I leaned back in my chair, listening. Nothing. No whispers. No shuffling. Not even the sound of breath against the door. And then Sanaa spoke. "Aisha. I'm sorry." Her voice wavered. Not the apology of someone caught, but the plea of someone cornered by something far heavier than shame. I sat up, the legs of my chair scraping the floor softly. The apartment drew in around me, walls shadowed by the single bulb above. I had lived here for years, and never realized how small a home becomes when the truth is finally allowed to sit in every room. "You have to open it," Sanaa whispered, almost breathless. He's scaring me." Her words fell flat. Confusing. Dislocated. I felt a cold ripple move through my chest. Not fear. Not anger. Something quieter, like realization shifting into place. Had I been so focused on my own hurt that I hadn't noticed the energy behind his voice? The strain? The edge? Sanaa knocked again, just once. A single, trembling sound. "Please." My breath caught. Not because she asked, but because for the first time since this began, I wasn't sure who the real danger in that bathroom was. I stood slowly, the chair groaning behind me as though it wanted me to stay seated, stay still, stay safe. The hallway felt longer now, stretched by everything unsaid. The bathroom door waited at the far end, quiet, too quiet. I didn't take a step toward it. Not yet. Instead, I rested my hand on the back of the dining chair, grounding myself in something solid. Sanaa's voice drifted out again, soft, strained, almost whispering through tears. Aisha, please. Just open it. Please. The apartment held its breath with me. And I realized. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about what waited behind that door. And whether I was ready to face it. The guest bathroom light flickered once before settling into its dim, forgiving glow. I stepped inside like someone entering a memory they weren't sure belonged to them. The cold tiles pressed against my bare feet, grounding me, reminding me that this, right here, was real. Not imagined. Not feared. Real. I turned the faucet on. Water sputtered, then flowed steady, clear, untouched by anyone else's hands. When I cupped it and lifted it to my face, the chill climbed down my spine. Outside, down the hall, his voice was muffled by the walls. Still calling my name. Still pretending he didn't know what I already knew. I leaned over the sink, watching droplets gather at the tip of my chin before falling again, small, quiet echoes in a room too clean, too unused to hold this kind of moment. This bathroom never held our arguments. Never absorbed our laughter. Never listened to whispered promises or tired apologies. It was the room guests used, polite, simple, untouched. Maybe that's why I came here. The mirror in front of me was flat, steady. It didn't tremble the way my hands did. It didn't blink away the images replaying in my mind, steam curling beneath the bathroom door, the soft rise of another woman's voice, the wet slap of water shifting inside the tub. I stared at myself as if waiting for the hurt to show. Waiting for the anger. Waiting for proof that I was breaking. But all I saw was a woman, awake. That unsettled me more than anything. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. But this strange clarity settling behind my eyes, like a fog lifting, leaving the sharp edges of the truth visible for the first time. Behind the locked bathroom door, they were speaking again. Low. Uneven. And even with the water running, I could still hear him. He called my name like he'd practiced it. Soft at the edges. Controlled. As if he thought a calm voice could rewrite the scene he was trapped in. Aisha, just talk to me. He said, voice warping through distance and guilt. I didn't answer. The water kept running. The mirror kept watching. My fingers curled around the sink's porcelain edge. Smooth. Cold. Uncomplicated. He spoke again, something about explaining everything, his words tumbling over themselves, tripping on excuses he hadn't organized yet. Explain. Explain what? Two bodies sitting in warm bathwater together? Whispers pressed against tile? Laughter that broke into silence the second they heard my footsteps? My chest rose, steady, too steady. As though my body had finally decided it wouldn't perform heartbreak for him. I splashed more water on my face, letting the droplets fall into my hairline, drip down my neck. Letting them remind me I was still here, still breathing, still choosing something. Behind the mirror's reflection, I saw the faint outline of the hallway. Shadows shifting. Light bending. And his voice clinging to the air like something fragile he didn't want to drop. I lifted my head slowly, meeting my reflection as though seeing someone I'd ignored for far too long. She looked back at me, not with softness, but with certainty. A certainty I didn't know I had the right to claim. In the distance, Sanaa whispered something again. Words I couldn't make out. Words not meant for my ears, maybe not even meant for his. The house felt as though it was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. Waiting to see if I would crumble or stand or simply vanish into the quiet the way I had so many times before. His voice cut through the stillness. Let me explain. Explain. As if language could smooth over what water and skin had already confessed without words. I placed both palms flat against the counter. My rings glinted under the bathroom light, circles of promises that no longer meant what they used to. One gold band. One diamond that never stopped catching light even when my heart did. The woman in the mirror didn't flinch. Didn't soften. Didn't break. She just saw. Saw the years. Saw the patterns. Saw the version of herself she had folded and folded until she fit into the tiny spaces he left open. And something inside me shifted. Something final. I turned off the tap. The silence that followed was deeper than anything coming from the hallway. The knocking had stopped again. Only their breathing filled the spaces between the walls, ragged, uneven, desperate. I wiped my face with the edge of a towel, letting the fabric hold what the air couldn't. When I lifted my head one last time, the mirror reflected a woman I wasn't sure I'd ever truly met before today. A woman who looked alive. Steady. Unwilling to shrink anymore. Behind me, his voice softened into something pleading. Aisha, please. But the woman in the mirror didn't move. Didn't answer. She just stood there, quietly deciding what her next step would cost. And whether the price of staying was finally too high. The hallway light flickered the way old bulbs do when they've been asked to glow for too many years. I remember sitting there, my back against the cold wall, my hands resting in my lap like they no longer belonged to me. Behind the closed guest room door, their voices rose, muffled, frantic, scared of themselves. I didn't lean closer. I didn't move at all. It was strange, really, how a house could hold so much noise and still feel quiet. Like the walls already knew what was coming. I had walked away before either of them noticed, drifting down the corridor on legs that felt borrowed. The floor creaked under me, not loud, just a small sound, like the house whispering, "You already know. Stop pretending you don't." I sat. Right there on that faded hallway runner Sana always said she wanted to replace. The one with the fraying edges and a pattern that had lost its color over time. Funny how things fade quietly, even while you're living with them. Through the thin door, I could hear movement. Sana's footsteps pacing. My husband's voice catching, stopping, starting again. There was a rhythm to it, the rhythm of people trying to reshape a story that had already broken in their hands. I stared at the opposite wall. At nothing, really. Just pale paint with a crack running down the corner like a quiet vein. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't even hurting the way I thought it would. It just waited. For truth. For words that mattered. For something real. But all that came were the sounds of two people trying to sew up a wound without admitting there was blood. Her voice broke first. Aisha, please, it wasn't like that. She wasn't talking to me. Not yet. She was talking through the closed door, the same way people talk through their own guilt, hoping it will sound softer, cleaner, manageable. Then my husband's voice, low and urgent. It looked wrong, I know, but it wasn't what you think. He kept saying that. It wasn't what you think. Like the words could crawl under the door and fix the shape of what I'd already seen in their eyes. Sana started crying, the kind of crying that doesn't build, just erupts. Like she'd been holding it back for years. I didn't want this, she kept saying. I didn't want any of this. Their voices tangled, overlapping like two threads pulled too tight. He tried to soothe her. She kept apologizing to him. Not to me. And something about that, something quiet and sharp, slid under my ribs. I leaned my head back against the wall. The paint felt cool. Steady. Honest, in a way neither of them could be right now. I listened. Not because I wanted answers. But because the truth has a way of revealing itself in what people don't mean to say. And they weren't talking like two people caught in a mistake. They were talking like two people caught in a story they'd rehearsed too long. At some point, I don't remember when, the door handle rattled. My husband's voice softened. "Aisha, can I explain?" I didn't answer. Didn't look up. Silence stretched between us, long and delicate, like a thread holding something fragile. He didn't open the door. Maybe he knew better. Behind him, Sanaa's crying turned smaller, quieter, almost childlike. A sound that carried its own kind of confession. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just the soft thud of someone sitting on the edge of the bed, the weight of it making the spring sigh. Then Sanaa said something I wasn't supposed to hear. "We can't keep lying like this. It's tearing us apart. Not hurting Aisha. Not destroying her marriage. No. Tearing us apart." The words settled in the hallway like dust in a sunbeam, visible, undeniable. My husband whispered back, something too soft to catch, but the tone I knew. I had heard it once. Years ago. When he thought he might lose me for good. It wasn't the tone of a man trying to save his marriage. It was the tone of someone trying to hold on to a truth he still refused to say out loud. And suddenly, the room behind that door felt too crowded with secrets to breathe. I pressed a hand to the floor beside me, steadying myself, grounding myself. There are different kinds of betrayal. Some come with fire. Some come with silence. And some, like this, come wrapped in a story two people are willing to rewrite until it destroys everything around them. I stood slowly. Not because I was ready, but because the ground beneath me felt too familiar, too forgiving. Their whispering paused, sensing movement. A shift in the air. A truth preparing to step out of the shadows. I didn't open the door. Didn't knock. Didn't ask for their version of anything. I just walked down the hallway, each step echoing softly, like the house exhaling. At the end of the corridor, the evening light spilled across the floor, warm, gentle, indifferent. I let it touch my face. Behind me, I heard Sanaa's voice break again, a sound full of something deeper than guilt. Something closer to fear. I didn't turn back. Some stories unravel on their own. You just have to stop holding the threads. The house was too still for evening. Even the dust hanging in the hallway air looked like it was holding its breath. I stood halfway between the kitchen and the guest room door, fingers resting on the edge of the wall, steadying myself on something that didn't tremble. Behind that thin door, their whispers rose and fell like waves hitting a shore they didn't want to reach. Then, soft but sharp enough to cut through wood, I heard Sanaa's voice. Just one sentence. One thread pulled loose. "Please," he promised he would tell you. The words hit the air different. Like they belonged to a story I never knew I was living in. Something inside me stilled. Not fear. Not even anger. Just a quiet, heavy pause, the kind that comes when the room shifts and you finally notice what's been missing from the picture. The hallway light hummed above me, flickering once, twice, making shadows breathe across the floor. I stood there, listening without moving, as if any step might cause the truth to scatter. Her voice wasn't the slippery kind she used earlier. There was a tremor in it, yes, but underneath, something steadier, older. The walls carried small pieces of their conversation to me. Words I wasn't meant to hear. Words that slid between the cracks in the door like smoke. My husband murmured her name, a warning soaked in embarrassment. Silencing her the way someone would close a curtain over a burning window. But the damage was done. Promises. Secrets. A story stretching further back than the single night, further back than a bathtub and a half-closed door. I pressed my palm flat against the wall. The paint felt warm, touched by the hallway bulb that struggled to keep the truth dim. I wasn't sure if Sanaa's voice was confessing something. Or making sure I couldn't walk away from it anymore. Some voices shake when they lie. Some shake when they finally tell the truth. Hers. Hers sounded like both. Inside the room, there was movement, sudden, frantic. A chair scraped the floor. Someone's breath caught in their throat. My husband whispered harshly, "Sana, stop." His voice wasn't angry. It was scared. And that fear didn't belong to a man worried about being caught in something foolish. It belonged to someone cornered by something heavier than guilt. Sana tried again. I could hear her breath shake before the words even formed. He said he'd tell you before things got worse. I closed my eyes. Worse. The word settled on my skin like cold rain. Not before you find out. Not before this ruins your marriage. No. Before things got worse. There it was, the shape of a shadow I had felt all along, stretching behind them, reaching into my home long before tonight. I could hear his footsteps cross the room quickly. A soft thud, maybe his hand covering her mouth, or her grabbing his sleeve, refusing to be silenced again. "Don't," he whispered. "Not like this. Not like this." As if there was a proper way to let a secret rot its way into a marriage. As if any version of this story could ever be gentle. Sana's voice cracked. "You promised me." And the way she said me. Not you promised her. But me. It changed the whole texture of the air around me. This wasn't about a mistake. It was about a pact. I stepped closer, not meaning to, not planning it. Just drawn by the pull of something unraveling on the other side. My shadow slipped over the doorframe. Light trembled against it. Inside, their whispers sharpened. My husband asked her to sit down, his voice thin, stretched. But she didn't. I could hear the way she paced again, her feet brushing against the rug like she was trying to outrun whatever truth was finally pushing to the surface. Then she said it. Clearer than anything she'd said all night. "You can't keep hiding it from her. It's not fair to either of us. Either of us." My breath caught. There was a long, heavy silence after that, the kind that fills a room like thick fog, hard to see through, impossible to ignore. My husband exhaled slowly. A sound full of surrender, or defeat, or fear. Maybe all three. "Aisha doesn't need," he started. But he didn't finish. Because even he knew the sentence had no ending that wasn't a lie. Sana's breaths came shallow, like she'd run out of places to hide inside herself. "You said you would tell her before she got hurt," she whispered. "And now look." I felt that line like a hand pressed against my chest. Before she got hurt. They weren't talking about romance. Or temptation. Or a single moment of weakness. They were talking about something longer. Something older. Something they had both been carrying, together, right under my roof. Something they believed would break me if spoken. And suddenly, the quiet felt dangerous. I stepped back from the door, not out of fear, but clarity. Some truths don't need to be heard through wood and shadows. Some truths walk toward you on their own. Behind the door, their voices softened into frantic whispers again, but the shape of their secret had already taken form in the hallway air. The house felt different now, heavier, like it had been holding this story between its walls for years. I walked toward the far end of the hall, where the window let in a narrow line of night air, cool, steady, honest. Outside, a neighbor's porch light flickered once, then steadied. I watched it, letting the cold touch my face. Letting the truth settle beside me. Whatever he promised her. Whatever they shared. It was coming. And the house. The very walls. Already knew its name. The hallway had grown quiet enough to hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, a long, steady sigh that didn't belong to any living person. For hours, their voices had pushed through the bathroom door, rising, falling, breaking, desperate. Now, only silence pressed against the wood. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, legs tucked close, the tiles cold beneath me. Across from me, the bathroom door waited like a held breath. My eyes drifted to the doorknob, silver, still, unblinking. A small piece of metal that could end all the guessing. All it needed was one turn. One click. One moment of courage, or madness. I pushed myself up slowly, my hand slipping once against the wall as if the house didn't want to steady me. The corridor light above flickered again, the same tired bulb that had watched every moment of this night unfold. Its glow settled over the narrow space, soft and pale, like early morning trapped in a hallway that wasn't ready to wake. Their muffled breaths leaked through the door. Not words anymore. Just the weight of two people who had run out of lies big enough to stand behind. I found myself staring at the frame of the door, how clean it looked. Not a mark. Not a dent. Just plain, smooth white paint. It struck me how many times I'd walked past that door without ever wondering what stories hid behind it. How many evenings I'd cleaned the mirror inside it, folded towels for it, refilled the soap dispenser. Never realizing it would become the place where my whole life paused. My fingers hovered above the doorknob. It was colder than I expected. Not freezing, just the kind of cold that feels unfamiliar, like touching the past by accident. I wondered what kind of truth I had been preparing myself for. A simple betrayal? A foolish mistake? A secret affair? But their panic. Their trembling. Their half-formed sentences that never landed. It all pointed toward something else. Something older. Something with a long shadow. I kept my hand there, not turning, not letting go. Just sensing the cold. Sometimes cold can tell you more than heat ever could. The silence stretched thin. Not empty, heavy, filled with the unsaid. Behind the door, I heard a small shift. The soft thud of someone sitting down on the edge of the tub. A breath caught in the middle of inhaling. A whisper between them that didn't try to disguise fear anymore. My thumb slid along the knob. Just a little. Enough to feel the metal move, but not enough to turn. I imagined it. The door opening. Steam slipping out. Their faces lifting toward me in that mixture of guilt and relief that only comes when a secret is finally cornered. I imagined not opening it too. Walking away. Letting them sit inside with the truth they had dragged into my home. Letting the silence become its own judgment. Both choices felt heavy. Both felt like endings. I lowered my head, breathed out slowly, and let my voice soften into something steady, something that belonged to a woman who had already survived the hardest part. I asked them one question. Just one. The words left my mouth quietly, almost floating toward the door rather than striking it. What did he promise you? For a moment, I didn't hear anything. Not even breathing. It was the deepest silence of the night, the kind that doesn't wait, the kind that answers all by itself. Because if the truth had been small, they would have opened the door. If it had been simple, they would have spoken. If it had been innocent, they wouldn't have frozen. But they did. And that told me more than any confession. Sana made a small sound, something between a gasp and a swallow. My husband whispered her name sharply, as if pulling her back from a ledge only he knew she was standing on. Then, nothing. Just their fear breathing through the silence. I kept my hand on the knob, feeling my pulse settle. It's strange how calm a person can feel when the world stops pretending. I realized then that I didn't need them to answer me. Not every truth needs words. Some truths live in the spaces where sentences die. I leaned slightly forward, letting my forehead rest against the cold wood. You don't have to open the door, I said softly. You've already told me everything. My husband sucked in a breath, sharp, panicked. Not because of guilt. Because he knew I was right. Sana whispered something I couldn't make out. But her voice, trembling yet relieved, carried one thing clearly. She had been waiting for this moment. Maybe longer than I had. I straightened up slowly. The cold on my forehead faded, replaced by a warmth rising in my chest, not anger, not hurt. Awareness. The kind that wakes you up from a life you didn't realize you were sleepwalking through. My hand tightened on the doorknob. I could open it. I could end this half-story with one click. But the truth wasn't behind the door. It was already here, in my steady breath. In their stunned silence. In the way the house felt suddenly taller than it had all night. Some doors don't need to be opened. They open you. I let my hand fall from the doorknob. The cold left my skin slowly, like a goodbye that didn't want to linger. Behind me, the hallway stretched long and quiet, a path I could finally see without the fog of doubt clouding everything. I took one step back. Then another. Inside the bathroom, they remained silent, not out of defiance, but out of realization. They knew the moment had shifted. They knew I no longer needed their version of the truth. I glanced at the door one last time. The lock sat still, untouched. Waiting. Patient. Maybe I'd open it later. Maybe I wouldn't. For now, the silence was enough. It had spoken louder than anything they ever could. And somewhere deep inside, something old finally turned. The lock clicked beneath my fingers. A simple sound. A final one. The hallway seemed to exhale with me, long and quiet, the kind of silence that isn't empty, it's full of everything you've been holding in. I pressed my hand to the cool doorknob, and for a moment, I imagined stepping away. Walking past it. Pretending the night never happened. But I didn't. I turned it. And opened the door. Steam curled from the bathtub, carrying the faint scent of soap and something else I had known was here all along. They were there. Wrapped in towels. Eyes wide. Shadows of fear stretched across them like long fingers. I stepped into the bathroom slowly. The tiles were cold under my feet, slick with water that had dripped from them, evidence of their panic, their secrecy, their mistake. Sanaa's hair clung to her damp forehead, eyes too bright from crying. My husband's chest rose and fell unevenly, as if he had forgotten how to breathe properly. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just looked. The fear in their eyes was sharp, raw, and unfamiliar to me, not because it was new, but because I wasn't part of it anymore. I had stepped out of the story they were trying to write. I remembered the months leading up to tonight, whispered phone calls, the subtle smell of someone else in my home, small lies hidden in plain sight. The vases still on the shelf. The framed wedding photo crooked. The towels we had folded together. All of it sat around me like a quiet accusation. I breathed in the air that carried both their shame and my own awareness. A strange calmness had settled in me, heavier than anger, deeper than sadness. It felt like the moment I had been waiting for, not to punish, but to finally see clearly. I let my eyes linger on them. They expected chaos. They expected collapse. But I had already left that part of myself behind. I stepped aside. Just a small movement, a space created in the center of the bathroom. Neither of them deserved it. Not really. But it was mine to give. I could see the hesitation in their bodies. The way my husband's fingers curled into fists, the way he tried to find a foothold in this new reality. The way Sanaa's hands shook uncontrollably, like they were trying to hold herself together and failing. I said nothing at first. Let the silence stretch a little. Let them taste it. Then I spoke. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just steady. Clear. Pack a bag, I said. Now. Not tomorrow. Not later. My words didn't hit them like a hammer. They hovered instead, an invisible force pressing against the truth they had tried to hide. Sanaa didn't look at me. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. My husband's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, probably to argue, to apologize, to make it real, but I didn't give him the chance. I watched them fumble silently, like children caught in a storm they didn't understand. The space I created wasn't for reconciliation. It wasn't for forgiveness. It was for recognition of what had been done, of what could no longer continue. And still, neither of them moved past the threshold of what I had allowed. I stepped closer to the sink, brushing my fingers over the cool porcelain. The water droplets reflected the dim light like tiny prisms, each one holding a fragment of the night. I thought about every choice I had made up to this moment. About the quiet strength it had taken to listen, to wait, to observe without being swallowed by their chaos. "Do you understand?" I said softly. My husband's eyes flickered to mine. He nodded once, quickly. Not with relief. Not with understanding. Just acknowledgement. Sanaa's gaze remained fixed on the floor. Her lips quivered, her chest rose and fell in a rhythm I no longer recognized as fear. It was more like surrender. I realized then that the betrayal had been only the surface. The deeper truth had always been here, woven into their shared history. And now, it had to meet consequences, not through screaming, not through punishment, but through clear, deliberate action. I turned my back to the bathtub. Let the steam rise between us like a veil. It was no longer about punishment or revenge. It was about finality. About making a decision that belonged entirely to me. And for the first time, I felt it fully, the weight of control returning to my own hands. They moved slowly, first my husband, then Sanaa. Their towels clung to them like fragile armor, incapable of protecting them from what I had decided. I watched in quiet reflection as my husband grabbed a duffel bag, shoving clothes inside with trembling hands. Sanaa followed silently, too ashamed to speak, too aware of her own place in the story she hadn't wanted to tell. I didn't look at them again. Not because I didn't care. But because the moment belonged to me. I stepped past the bathroom doorway, into the hallway that suddenly seemed wider, lighter, less burdened. Outside, the night waited. Cold, patient, real. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had ended, and the uncertain shape of what was still unfolding. Some truths leave rooms empty. But some truths make the walls breathe again. And tonight, I chose which truth to let live. The apartment was empty in a way that made every sound feel amplified. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the wall clock, even the wind brushing against the curtains, all were louder than they had been before. I sat on the bathroom floor, legs curled beneath me, hands resting lightly on the cold tiles. The bathtub loomed beside me, still wet, still holding the echo of what had happened. Outside, the city breathed through the open window. Cars whispered down distant streets, a rhythm that seemed both ordinary and impossible to reconcile with the night I had just survived. I didn't move. I didn't reach for a towel. I just listened. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like waiting. It felt like truth. The air smelled faintly of soap and steam, mingling with something older, tension, fear, regret. I leaned back against the cool wall, eyes fixed on the bathtub where my life had fractured in a single moment. It was strange how stillness could feel so alive. Every shadow on the floor, every reflection in the tile, seemed to carry memory. I remembered the whispered conversations, the small betrayals that had piled up like dust on the shelves I'd never thought to check. And now, they were gone. The apartment felt raw. Stripped of pretense. Clean, in a way that was almost painful. I could hear my own heartbeat for the first time in years. A steady drum under my ribs, reminding me that I was still here, still breathing, still able to feel. I traced my fingers along the edge of the tub, the smooth porcelain a contrast to the turmoil inside me. I thought about the years of quiet compromise, of shaping myself into someone I thought my husband wanted. All of it had led here, to this silence, to this moment where grief and peace were inseparable. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of the city wash over me. The distant honk of a horn, the soft shuffle of tires on asphalt, the occasional muffled shout, life continuing beyond the walls that had contained so much betrayal. I got up slowly, careful not to disturb the remnants of their presence, a towel here, a wet footprint there. The apartment seemed smaller now, but lighter, as if the weight of deceit had been lifted, leaving only the structure of reality. I moved from room to room. The living room smelled faintly of the perfume that had haunted my senses, but now it felt like a ghost, not a threat. The couches were empty, the cushions unwrinkled. Even the framed wedding photograph looked different, not crooked, not accusing, just there, a quiet witness to what had happened. I paused at the kitchen counter, running my hand over the surface, feeling the smooth wood beneath my fingers. I could almost imagine the life I had been trying to maintain, dinners prepared, laughter shared, routines kept. And yet, that life had been built on small unspoken truths, all of them fragile. I walked to the bedroom. The folded laundry I had touched earlier now seemed trivial, yet it held the weight of everyday life, a reminder that nothing truly disappears. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I let myself feel the duality of the night, the grief of what had been broken, and the first quiet stirrings of reclaiming what was mine. I realized then that silence could be a companion, not a punishment. That stillness could teach me more than confrontation ever would. I returned to the bathroom, kneeling beside the tub. The water had dried into faint rivulets along the tiles, leaving tiny trails like memory etched into the surface. I reached for a towel, but didn't pick it up. Instead, I let my fingers hover above the fabric, feeling the choice that was mine alone. The night had ended for them, but it had just begun for me. And in that beginning, there was no rush, no performance, no demand for instant healing. Only the quiet acknowledgement of what had been lost, and what could still be found. I pressed my palms to my knees, letting the warmth of my own body remind me of presence. The air outside whispered against the window. A car passed slowly, its tires singing against the asphalt. The world continued, indifferent yet kind, indifferent yet relentless. I thought about the questions I would face tomorrow. How to rebuild the apartment, yes. How to rebuild myself, certainly. Where to start, in the rooms, in the walls, in the spaces I had left empty. The grief and the peace shared a breath, one exhaling slowly, and I let it fill me. It was uncomfortable, honest, and real. I realized that the quiet was not an absence. It was a beginning. I sat back against the wall, watching the steam fade into the corners of the ceiling. The apartment smelled faintly of soap, water, and the night. I breathed in deeply. Let the stillness settle into my bones. Tomorrow would be uncertain. The days after that even more so. But for the first time in a long time, I felt the rhythm of my own heartbeat, steady and unyielding. Somewhere beyond the open window, the city continued, life carrying on in soft, persistent waves. And I thought, finally, that maybe the first thing to rebuild wasn't the apartment. It was me. And for the first time, I believed I could. The night was quiet. The silence was honest. And I was awake.